Part 42. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 411. After hearing what Lin Yu said, everyone felt as if they were falling into an ice cave. They looked at each other in bewilderment. Yehai even knelt and crawled forward. I tried to stop them at the beginning. I said that we couldn't attack such an old man, but those guys didn't listen to me at all, so in the end it led to such a tragedy. Please investigate it clearly, sir. After hearing what he said, Lin Yu sneered at the corner of his mouth, and then turned his head and glared at the man coldly. At this time, Lin Yu was like a wild beast. After they felt the murderous intent in Lin Yu, their faces turned pale instantly. No. Lin Yu just smiled. It's no use for you to explain this to me. I will send you to hell, and then you can go to hell and explain to Grandpa. At this time, Ye Lingxiu rushed out. After recognizing Lin Yu, Ye Lingxiu hesitated for a moment and then stood in front of these people. At this time, after Lin Yu saw Ye Lingxiu like this, a bit of gloom flashed in his eyes, and at this moment, a murderous intent spread from his chest. Get out of the way, Lin Yu said in a cold voice. At this time, his voice was full of anger, and his eyes were about to spit out fire. At this moment, Ye Lingxiu saw Lin Yu like this, and her eyes were full of fear, and then she shook her head. Her face was even paler. No, don't do this, okay? Ye Lingxiu's eyes were fixed on Lin Yu, and there was a trace of tears in her eyes, which made people feel more pity. At this time, Lin Yu gritted his teeth and said, I tell you again, get out of my way, otherwise, don't blame me for being rude to you. Don't think that you have the capital to be arrogant in front of me just because I don't hit women. Lin Yu gritted his teeth and said. At this time, Ye Lingxiu was pressed by Lin Yu's momentum, and her face was even paler. At this time, Ye Lingxiu just fell to her knees on the ground. Although they know about this, they have no way to stop Ye Tian. Ye Tian is the second best master in the city, so what can you do to them? At this time, Ye Lingxiu was already a little hysterical. Her eyes were fixed on Lin Yu, and her eyes were full of pleading. At this time, Lin Yu's eyes were red, but he also knew one thing at this time, that is, even if he killed them all, his grandfather would not come back. All the people in the Ye family never thought that this inconspicuous little girl from the side branch could actually save the entire Ye family at this critical moment. Of course, they knew that Ye Lingxiu might have an unusual relationship with Lin Yu. At this moment, they looked at each other. Then, they made a decision. If this little girl is really related to this expert, then if this little girl becomes the head of the Ye family and then wins over this expert, I'm afraid no one in the whole city will dare to point fingers at the Ye family. When everyone thought of this, their eyes were full of excitement. At this moment, Lin Yu calmed down. He just turned his head and glanced at Ye Lingxiu. A few complex colors flashed in his eyes, and then he turned around and left without looking back. After Lin Yu left, everyone breathed a sigh of relief, and at this time Ye Lingxiu felt that his eyes went black, and then the whole person fainted. At this time, Lin Yu was walking slowly in the city. At this time, he suddenly felt a familiar breath. When he walked to the corner of the street, he just stood there. Come out. After Ye Qiu heard what Lin Yu said, he walked out slowly. Lin Yu turned around and glanced at Ye Qiu. Are you here to seek revenge for your Ye family? After Ye Qiu heard what Lin Yu said, he quickly waved his hand and shook his head. At this time, he shook his head like a wave drum. No, of course not, don't get me wrong. Lin Yu turned around and glanced at Ye Qiu, with a meaningful smile on his lips. If not, what are you here for? At this time, Ye Qiu took out a jar of wine, and then shook it in front of Lin Yu. Do you want to drink together? Lin Yu glanced at Ye Qiu, with a meaningful smile on his lips, and nodded gently after a moment. Okay, where should we drink? Let's go to the beach, how about it? Lin Yu nodded gently, and then rushed directly to the beach. Lin Yu was very fast, so Yechiu couldn't keep up with him. Beach. A bright moon rose slowly, and then Lin Yu and Yechiu, each holding a jar of wine, drank it in big gulps. Actually, I can generally understand your feelings, but people have their own life and death, just like my father, who was forced to death by others. After hearing what Yechiu said, Lin Yu's eyes flashed with a few complex colors, and then he frowned slightly. Alas, but this matter is all caused by me. If it weren't for him taking me in, I wouldn't have taken out the demon core. If I didn't take out the demon core and he didn't sell it, then he wouldn't have such a disaster. At this time, after hearing what Lin Yu said, Yechiu's mouth corners also raised a few bitter smiles, and then shook his head helplessly. Alas, life and death are determined by fate, wealth and honor are determined by God, everything is determined by fate, but are you really going to let this matter go? Except for the grocery store owner, all the culprits have been executed, and all that remains is to give Grandpa a grand funeral. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 412. The two of them were drinking and chatting like this, and before they knew it, it was done. At this time, Lin Yu slowly stood up, and then turned around and glanced at Yechiu. And then just smiled. I can tell you people of the Ye family later that I don't want to pursue the previous matters for the time being, but I want all of them to wear mourning and observe mourning for my grandfather for 3 years. If they can do it, then I can spare them a life. If they can't do it, then don't blame me for being rude to them. Lin Yu said coldly. After hearing what Lin Yu said, Yechiu also nodded slightly. I will tell you this on your behalf. They should indeed do the same. This can be considered as what they deserve. A hint of determination flashed across the corners of Yechiu's eyes and brows. After Lin Yu saw this scene, he nodded with satisfaction, and then got up and walked outside. Yechiu's eyes were fixed on Lin Yu's back, and there was a somewhat complicated meaning in the corners of his eyes and brows. Ye family. What should we do now? The head of the family is dead now. If those guys know that the family is dead, they will definitely take advantage of it. If that happens, something bad will happen. Yeah, I'm just afraid that they will really take advantage of it, and then our Ye family will be doomed. At this moment, Yehai sneered from a distance. After everyone heard Yehai's voice, they turned their heads and glanced at Yehai. At this time, their eyes were fixed on Yehai. It's been so long and you can still laugh. At this time, Yehai just spread his hands gently, and then shook his head slightly. Why can't I laugh? Don't forget that that person was originally full of murderous intent, but then suddenly retreated. What was the reason? I don't need to say more, you should be able to understand it. Yehai's eyes were staring directly at them, and the smile at the corner of his mouth became more and more obvious. At this time, after hearing what Yehai said, everyone looked at each other, and then nodded lightly. Yehai is right. The relationship between that little girl and that master must be extraordinary. Now our family can be considered leaderless. If that little girl is promoted as the head of the family, then the Ye family will have a leader. It's difficult, that master must not be able to just sit back and watch. Everyone nodded in agreement, and at this time Yeyu, the third eldest son of the Ye family, turned his head and glanced at Yehai. There were some complex colors flashing in his eyes, and then he slowly walked to Yehai's side. At this time, he also bowed his head like this. There's one thing you'd better not forget. Xiaonazai's brother was killed by you, losing Yi. Others may not know this, but I know it very well. At this time, Yehai heard Yeyu. After saying this, his pupils suddenly enlarged, and there was a look of disbelief in the corners of his eyes and eyebrows. At this time, Yehai slowly raised his head and stared directly at Yeyu. Everyone saw the two of them whispering on the other side, and they were naturally very curious. What are you talking about? I said you two have to say something secretly to yourself. Is it possible that you can't say it out loud? The eldest elder of the Ye family said in a cold voice, and at this time, Yehai's face was slightly ugly, but Yeyu's face was much normal. At this time, Yeyu just smiled like this, "It's nothing, I just suddenly remembered that my blessed calligraphy and painting were once at Brother Hai's place. I just asked him when it would be convenient to get this calligraphy and painting back." At this time, after Yehai heard what Yeyu said, he nodded slightly. That's right, it's just a matter of calligraphy and painting, it's just a matter of calligraphy and painting. Obviously, what the two of them said was not credible. The eldest elder of the Ye family stared straight at the two of them, with a strange color flashing in the corners of his eyes and eyebrows. Really? I'm curious about what kind of rare treasure can make you two never forget it in such a solemn family meeting. If you have time, you must show it to me. The eldest elder of the Ye family said coldly. Yehai and Yeyu nodded solemnly, that's nature, that's nature. At the end of the family meeting unanimously decided to elect Ye Lingxiu as the new head of the Ye family. After all, nowadays, the head of the Ye family is not like the hotcake that everyone flocked to when the Ye family was strong. Nowadays, the head of the Ye family will not get half of the benefits, but will bear huge risks, so naturally everyone wants to dump this mess outside. Poor little guy Ye Lingxiu became a victim in this way. After the family meeting ended, Yeyu turned around and glanced at Yehai, and then the two of them walked out slowly. The great elder followed them, wanting to see what kind of medicine these two men were selling in their gourds. Two people arrived at the back of the mountain. At this time, Yehai turned his head and stared directly at Yeyu. There was a bit of solemnity in the corners of his eyes and brows. At this time, his brows seemed to be knitted together. Similar. Tell me, what do you want to do? If you have any conditions, just tell me. If I can do it, I will do it for you. At this time, Yeyu heard Yehai. After saying this, he also laughed like this. At this moment, he gently patted Yehai's shoulder. Actually, I'm just saying this to give you a reminder. Nowadays, the Ye family and Ye Tian have fallen. It's not what it used to be. I think you can become an ally, so others just want to sell you a favor. At this time, Yehai obviously didn't believe the nonsense Yeyu said, and his eyes were fixed on Yeyu. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 413. Do you think I would believe you if you say that? After Yeyu heard what Yehai said, he also laughed like this. At this time, he seemed to be crazy, and his whole person was extremely crazy. Ha ha ha, what I just said almost moved me. I didn't expect that. It still can't move you. You are really a stone-hearted person. Yehai's brows condensed slightly, and then he turned his head and glanced coldly at Yeyu. Stop talking nonsense, just tell me what your purpose is. Why hide it like this? What's the point? Okay, but before that, we have to invite another guest. After Yeyu finished speaking, with a thought in his mind, a python appeared behind the elder of the Ye family, and then the python directly wrapped around the elder of the Ye family. At this time, the eldest elder of the Ye family looked shocked, and his eyes were full of disbelief. How is it possible? How could this giant celestial python be in your hands? Isn't this the domain lord level alien egg that only exists in the Ye family's ancestral hall? At this time, after Yeyu heard what the eldest elder of the Ye family said, he nodded gently and smiled. Yes, eldest elder, this is the domain lord in the ancestral hall of the Ye family. Level alien eggs, That's right, do you have any questions? At this time, the eyes of the eldest elder of the Ye family flashed a bit of gloom, and at this time, his brows seemed to be knitted together. Do you know what mistake you have made now? Let me go immediately and admit your mistake before following me to the ancestral tablet. Otherwise, you will be hunted down by all the Ye family members. At this moment, Ye grabbed the neck of the eldest elder of the Ye family, a cold look flashed in his eyes, and a sneer curled up at the corner of his mouth. Old guy, don't stay here with me. You don't have the qualifications. Do you believe that if I want to, the giant celestial python can tear you into pieces and swallow you bit by bit? Yehai, who was standing by at the moment, was shocked when he saw this scene. He was dumbfounded. There was a look of disbelief in the corners of his eyes and brows. At this time, the eldest elder of the Ye family felt as if he had fallen into an ice cave, because he could feel that what Ye said did not seem to be joking with him. So at this time, the eldest elder of the Ye family smiled coquettishly. It doesn't matter, it is just an alien egg. Sooner or later, this alien egg will be used by others. You are also a member of my Ye family. It is a great blessing for the Ye family to be able to hatch this giant Tianlin python. At this time, after Ye heard what the eldest elder of the Ye family said, a few meaningful smiles appeared on the corners of his mouth, and then he turned around and glanced at the eldest elder of the Ye family. There was even a bit of a sneer at the corner of his mouth. Really? Great elder, do you really have this idea? Really? Yeah, you just said it unhurriedly, and the smile at the corner of his mouth became more and more obvious. At this time, the eldest elder of the Ye family also nodded slightly. Of course, what I said is true. When did I lie to you? Just say so. Yeah, you nodded slightly, a cold look flashed in his eyes, and a sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. Great elder, to be honest, you are really a bit embarrassed to say that. I'm so moved. It's a pity that I didn't invite you today, but you came, so I can't keep you. After the eldest elder of the Ye family heard what Ye said, a somewhat ominous premonition suddenly rose in his heart. At this time, the eldest elder of the Ye family wanted to break away and run away. But at this moment, Tianlin giant python locked him tightly, preventing him from moving at all. You've been doing well lately, so I'll make an exception for you and give you an extra meal today. The Tianlin giant python understood what Ye said. At this time, the Tianlin giant python actually spit out the snake core in Ye's direction, seeming to be very excited. Then, the giant Tianlin python opened its huge mouth, moved toward the head of the eldest elder of the Ye family, and swallowed it in one mouthful. The eldest elder of the Ye family only struggled slightly for a few times, and then he was completely swallowed by the giant Tianlin python. At this time, Yehai, who saw the scene from the side, suddenly broke out in a layer of cold sweat on his forehead. Yehai's eyes were fixed on Ye. There was a complete look of fear. What exactly do you want me to do? Just say it. At this time, after Ye heard what Yehai said, a few meaningful smiles appeared on the corners of his mouth, and then he waved his hand casually. Look at you, why are you so nervous? The two of us will be partners in the future. Don't worry, I won't treat you like that old guy. Ye pinned Yehai with a smile on his face, but at this moment Yehai just felt as if he was pinned by a fierce beast. In the corners of his eyes and eyebrows, there was a complete sense of panic. Okay, I will listen to you no matter what you want me to do in the future. That's all right, right? Ye nodded with satisfaction, and then looked at Yehai. Do you know why Ye Long has made such rapid progress recently? When Yehai heard what Ye said, he was shocked, and then he fell to his knees. I beg you, don't try to get longer no matter what. I am willing to be your slave in the future. What do you think? When Ye heard what Yehai said, he suddenly laughed. Don't be like this. You haven't heard what I said yet. How do you know that this is not a good thing for you? Yehai nodded heavily, "You are right." And at this time, Yayu suddenly laughed, and the look he gave Yehai was like looking at a fool. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 414. Ha ha ha, I didn't expect what I said, but you really don't believe anything. Do you think I should call you naive, or should I call you stupid? Yeah, you just said it unhurriedly, and the sneer at the corner of his mouth became more and more obvious. At this time, Yehai seemed to be a little unbearable, and then he started to act like this. He said coldly, "If you have something to say, just tell me. If I can help you, I will of course help you. If I can't help you and you are not satisfied, at worst, you will kill me just like you killed the great elder. That's okay." At this time, Yayu also laughed like this after hearing what Yehai said, and then nodded slightly. Yes, yes, they are indeed somewhat bloody, but what I hate the most are bloody people. After Yayu finished speaking, the scaly python suddenly came towards Yehai, and then at this moment, Yehai only felt that the air in his lungs was decreasing little by little, and his expression was decreasing. It slowly became ugly, and in the end it turned purple. "Aren't you very bloody? I won't cooperate with you today. I just want to see how hard your bones are and how long the Tianlin giant python will have to entangle you before it can entangle you to death." At this time, Yehai felt that his breathing was getting more and more difficult, but at this time, the Tianlin giant python stopped exerting his strength. He could barely breathe, but it was extremely difficult. Every time he breathed, it seemed as if he was being blown away. It felt like my lungs were about to burst. Actually, Yelong is no longer the Yelong you know. He is no longer your child. That little guy accidentally got the heart of a heavenly dragon. Now he has the blood of a heavenly dragon. In fact, to be precise, the heart blood has the blood of Tianlong. What I need you to do now is to take out his heart blood. If you are not willing, then I can do it for you. At this time, Yehai felt unprecedented pain. Although he was extremely reluctant to agree to this matter at this time, when he felt the heart-breaking pain, in the end, he still came out of his mouth, such a difficult thing, 3 words squeezed out. "I promise." After Yayu heard what Yehai said, a look of satisfaction flashed in his eyes. At this time, he clapped his hands gently. The Tianlin giant python reluctantly let go of Yehai, acting like a wronged child. At this time, Yayu just patted the Tianlin giant python gently. "It doesn't matter, I will reward you with a delicious meal tonight. Anyway, the remaining trash Yetian has is of no use. I've given it to you all the time, how about it?" After hearing what Yayu said, the Tianlin giant python started nodding its huge snake head crazily. At this time, after Yehai heard what Yayu said, there was a wave of turmoil in his heart. The corners of his eyes and eyebrows were filled with a look of disbelief. At this time, Yayu just smiled slightly. The Tianlin giant python is a strange beast at the level of the lord of this domain. It has such a noble bloodline, but it just eats a few inferior people. What do you think is wrong? Is it the right place? At this time, Yehai naturally did not dare to say no, so at this time he shook his head desperately. "No, no, no, there must be nothing wrong. Even if those guys were eaten, it was them, it's an honor." After Yayu heard what Yehai said, he laughed like this, and then nodded with satisfaction. Yes, yes, I didn't expect you to be really good at talking. Okay, I'll give you 3 days. Within 3 days, you must completely take out Yelong's hard work for me. If you can't do it, when the time comes, the Tianlin giant python will slowly swallow you in just like it wanted to swallow that old guy. Yayu's expression turned gloomy and cold when he received the last comment. At this time, although Yehai was helpless, he had no choice but to agree. Yayu gently patted Yehai's shoulder. "Okay, you don't have to feel any guilt. That little guy is no longer your child. His mind has been completely swallowed by Tianlong. Now he is just a lackey of Tianlong. Have you forgotten how cold his attitude was when your arm was cut off last time? But, he still agreed to stand up for me and made a 7-day appointment with that guy. Yu smiled suddenly, and then he just waved his hand casually, and as soon as the light and shadow came, he suddenly appeared in front of Yehai. This useless old guy, if I didn't still need you and this little guy's identity as a cover now, I would have wanted to eat it, you old immortal. When my Tianlong strength is fully restored, that's when you'll die. At this time, after Yehai saw the scene of light and shadow, the corners of his eyes and brows were filled with a look of disbelief. At this time, his pupils suddenly enlarged, and then he couldn't help but shake his head crazily. Impossible, this matter is absolutely impossible. It is absolutely impossible for Long Er to say such treacherous words. You must have lied to me. At this time, Yu kicked Yehai in the lower abdomen. His eyes were fixed on Yehai, and a sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. Am I lying to you? Open your dog eyes and see clearly. Your son is like this. Do you need me to say anything more? At this time, Yehai collapsed on the ground. His eyes and eyebrows were soaked with loneliness. After a while, Yehai slowly raised his head and looked at Yu. You are so powerful. I think it should not be difficult for you to take out Long Er's blood. But why don't you do it yourself? Why do you ask me to do it? Even at this time, Yehai still had the rationality he should have. His eyes were fixed on Yu, and Yu frowned slightly. You seem to be questioning me. At this time, the giant python was spitting out its snake core behind Yu. When Yehai saw this scene, he immediately waved his hand. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 415. No, of course not, of course not. At this time, Yehai didn't want to die like this, so he naturally didn't dare to be too presumptuous in front of Yu at this time. I don't want to talk any more nonsense to you. If I don't make fun of you in 7 days, both of you will die. After Yu finished speaking, he turned around and left. At this time, after Yehai saw Yu like this, a dignified expression flashed across his eyes and brows. At this time, his brows seemed to be twisted, as if together. At this time, Yehai frowned slightly. What exactly does Yu want to do? It's strange why he suddenly became so angry when I said this. This is really strange. Matter. Yehai was as confused as the 2-foot-tall monk, but now after calm analysis, he could also understand that there was definitely something wrong with Yu, and the problem was huge. But at this time, outside the Ye family, Yu stood at the door of the Ye family, with a somewhat strange color in the corners of his eyes and brows. Although they have been in this small town for many years, it can be said that they never see each other when they look up, but Yu had not seen him before. And the people of the Ye family never spoke to each other, and even if they saw it, they would pretend they didn't see it. At this time, after a guard saw Yu, his eyes and brows were full of ridicule, and the corner of his mouth was just a sneer. Who do I think I am? It turns out that he is the descendant of the good-for-nothing who was expelled from the Ye family back then. I didn't expect that he would actually have the nerve to come back today. After the other guard heard what the man said, he also sneered a little bit at the corner of his mouth, and then shook his head. Maybe he came back and knelt down to beg the great elder to lend him some money. After all, I heard that a few days ago, you were blocked at home to collect debts. After the two people finished speaking, they laughed at the same time. At this time, Yu took a deep breath. He wanted to calm down his mood, but for some reason, he couldn't calm down at this moment. Calm down. At this time, Yu suddenly smiled. He turned his head and glared coldly at the two of them. A bit of coldness flashed in his eyes, and the killing intent on his body was even more awe-inspiring. Yet. After Yechiu finished speaking, he immediately moved his mind, and the blue sea green gold beast suddenly appeared behind him. The blue sea gold-eyed beast rushed towards the two of them. The two of them he didn't even have time to summon the strange beast, and his head was instantly swallowed by the blue sea golden-eyed beast. After the people of the Ye family heard about this creation, they rushed out one after another, and then they saw two headless corpses lying on the snowy slope, and then the blue sea green gold beast stood up. Behind Yechiu, there was still a bit of blood at the corner of his mouth. After everyone saw this scene, they looked at each other in confusion, their eyes fixed on Yechiu. Although they were extremely angry at this time, they were even more aware of how powerful this blue sea green gold beast was, so no one of them dared to act rashly at this time, and no one dared to step forward rashly. Yechiu just glanced at the crowd coldly, a cold light flashed in his eyes, and the smoky murderous intention on his body was clearly revealed at this moment. Today I'm just here to deliver a message. My husband has said that he can let this matter go by now, but he must wear mourning and observe mourning for the old man for 3 years. If you can't do it, my husband will come to the door in person. Visit. After Yechiu finished speaking, he turned around and prepared to leave, but at this moment, a cold voice suddenly came over. When you arrive at the door of my Ye family, you want to leave directly after killing people from my Ye family. I'm afraid you don't take the people of my Ye family seriously. The voice of the third child of the Ye family suddenly sounded, and at this time, Yechiu didn't even turn his head. The blue sea green gold beast just let out a roar from its mouth. The third son of the Ye family was so arrogant before, but now he seemed so embarrassed. After feeling the terrifying strength of the blue sea green gold beast, the third son of the Ye family could not help but turn pale for a while. It's just a waste from back then. How could there be such a lord-level beast? What kind of bad luck did this kid have? Everyone looked at each other in confusion. You must know that this lord-level beast is at the same level as the beast owned by Ye Tian. In other words, the strength of the young man in front of him has reached the level that he can control the Ye family. Yechiu didn't even look back, and then said in a cold voice, "Do you want to avenge them too?" At this time, the third son of the Ye family was silent for a while after hearing what Yechiu said. At this moment, he really did not dare to talk nonsense anymore. At this time, after Yechiu saw the third son of the Ye family looking like this, a sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. Since I don't have that arrogant strength, then I will just be your little tortoise. Stay in this turtle shell at home. After Yechiu finished speaking, he turned around and left. At this time, the third son of the Ye family looked gloomy, as if he was about to drip. At this time, Lin Yu took a piece of 10,000-year-old jade and prepared to build a coffin for the old man. At this time, a pretty figure pushed the door open and walked in. Lin Yu seemed to feel Ye Lingxiu's breath, but he didn't say much at this time. Ye Lingxiu didn't say much either. She just came to the old man's body, and then knelt down in front of the old man's body. At this time, Ye Lingxiu was wearing mourning clothes and her eyes were red. Neither of them spoke. At this time, the air between them seemed to be frozen. Lin Yu carefully built the coffin there, and Ye Lingxiu was kneeling in front of the old man's body. Ye Lingxiu's health was not good, so after kneeling for a day, Ye Lingxiu's face was even more pale. At this time, Lin Yu's anger also subsided slightly. At this time, he just turned his head and glanced at Ye Lingxiu. If you can't hold on, there's no need to pretend to be strong here. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 416. At this time, after Ye Lingxiu heard what Lin Yu said, she turned her head and glanced at Lin Yu. I'm here to atone for the sins of the Ye family. At this time, Lin Yu's lips curved into a sneer, "This matter has nothing to do with you." Ya Lingxiu heard Lin Yu, and after saying this, she turned her head and glanced in his direction. "I am the head of the Ye family, why does this matter have nothing to do with me?" When Lin Yu heard what Ya Lingxiu said, he was stunned on the spot. At this juncture, being the head of the Ye family is not a good job. You are just a pawn for them to use. They are all so happy. A somewhat sarcastic smile appeared at the corner of Lin Yu's mouth. At this time, Ya Lingxiu also had a wry smile on her lips, and there was a sense of helplessness in the corners of her eyes and brows. "How do you think I don't know this? But now that the Ye family is in turmoil, I can't let him destroy this 1,000-year-old ancestral legacy." There was quite a bit of helplessness in Ya Lingxiu's tone, and Lin Yu also trembled slightly in his heart. "Anyway, you decide your own affairs. What you want to do depends on you." After Lin Yu finished speaking, he stopped talking and continued to concentrate on building the coffin for the old man. At this time, Ya Lingxiu was also beside him. He just sighed quietly and stopped talking. At this time, the two people were doing their own things, and the air became solid again. It didn't take long for people from the Ye family to come to rescue one after another. These people from the Ye family were afraid that they would accidentally anger Lin Yu, the evil star. But when they came here, Lin Yu didn't give them any good looks. At this time, Lin Yu just turned his head and glanced at them coldly, with a flash in his eyes. The cold light appeared, and a sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Get out." After everyone heard what Lin Yu said, their faces were slightly condensed, and a strange color flashed in the corners of their eyes and brows, and then they looked at each other like this: "Sir, we all know that what happened before was indeed our fault, but now we all know we were wrong, so you see." The eldest elder of the Ye family was afraid of making Lin Yu unhappy, so he spoke so quietly. At this time, Lin Yu's eyes also flashed a bit of gloom, his brows condensed slightly, and a bit of cold light flashed in his eyes. "I told you to get out, is it possible that you don't understand what I said?" After hearing what Lin Yu said, the few people around him nodded and smiled, and then turned around and left, as if they were afraid of provoking this evil star. They all have good intentions, so why do you? Ya Lingxiu was halfway through her words when she saw Lin Yu's red eyes, which were as red as blood. So at this time, Ya Lingxiu just finished her words and swallowed back half of her words. At this time, the Lu family. "Master, now those guys have provoked people who shouldn't be provoked. It is said that they have lost all their troops these days. I am afraid that their power this time is not what it was before. I think we can take advantage of it now. Take this opportunity to beat up the drowned dog." When Lu Xingyi heard what the man in front of him said, he turned his head and glanced in his direction, and then raised his eyebrows slightly. "Are you telling the truth?" At this time, the butler's eyes were full of determination, and then he nodded heavily, and the smile at the corner of his mouth became more and more obvious. "That's natural. Do you think I have the guts to deceive you now?" At this time, Lu Xingyi also nodded slightly, and a strange color flashed in the corners of his eyes and eyebrows. "I understand what you are talking about. I need to think about this matter first. After all, I don't know what that person is thinking right now. If I accidentally provoke that person, I'm afraid." At this time, after the housekeeper heard what Lu Xingyi said, some complex colors flashed in the corners of his eyes and brows. But. Lu Xingyi turned his head and glanced in his direction, then frowned slightly, then waved his hand casually and smiled. "It doesn't matter, if you have anything to say, just say it." After hearing what Lu Xingyi said, the man gritted his teeth like this, as if he had made up his mind. "Actually, what I want to say is that if we really don't take this opportunity to beat up the drowned dog, if the Ye family's vitality is restored by then we may not have the chance to beat the drowned dog up." At this time, after Lu Xingyi heard what the housekeeper said, some complex colors flashed in his eyes. At this moment, a servant ran in a panic, and the servant plopped down. He just fell to his knees on the ground. Reporting to the head of the family, there is a member of the family coming to see him outside. Lu Xingyi half closed his eyes, and a few complex colors flashed in his eyes, and then he turned his head and looked at the servant. Someone from the family? Who from the family? Tell me. That person said he seemed to be Yehai from the family. Lu Xingyi's mouth corners raised a few meaningful smiles, and a few mocking colors flashed in his eyes. Yehai from the family is really interesting. Is there anyone else besides Yehai from the family? It seems that there is another person, but I don't know him. At this time, Lu Xingyi nodded gently, and then waved his hand. Okay, I understand what you said, now you can go down. The man heard Lu Xingyi and said this. At that time, he also retreated respectfully. But when the man walked to the door, Lu Xingyi just called the man directly. Wait a minute. Let's call them in. I want to see what these people from the family are up to, and see if we can wipe out the family. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 417. At this moment, Yayu and Yehai walked in. At this time, Lu Xingyi was sitting alone on a chair. After seeing the two of them, he just waved his hands casually without even getting up. At this time, Lu Xingyi looked like a winner. Although the two of them were unwilling to do so, there was no way to get Lu Xingyi. At this time, Lu Xingyi just smiled. You two, I don't know what you are talking about when you come to me this time. Yayu and Yehai sat down like this. Yayu was just playing a supporting role. He just wanted to see if Lu Xingyi was a real person who could live with him. Apart from that, there was nothing else. Idea. At this time, Yehai also smiled like this, turned his head, and stared directly at Lu Xingyi. Master Lu, actually we are here to seek cooperation with you. I wonder if you agree or disagree. When Lu Xingyi heard this, after Yehai said this, he also half closed his eyes, with a playful smile on the corner of his mouth, and a trace of amusement flashed in his eyes. Seeking cooperation? You two should come and talk to me about how you want to seek cooperation. At this time, Lu Xingyi's eyes were staring directly at the two of them, and there was quite a bit of teasing in the corners of his eyes and brows. At this time, Yehai's face was suddenly overjoyed. Actually, the Ye family has been able to stand in the city for so many years. Apart from the Lord-level beast in Ye Tian's body, there is another reason. That is, there is actually a batch of extremely valuable pills in the ancestral hall of the Ye family. Medicine, the Ye family is in turmoil now. If we can take out this batch of pills reasonably, then. Yehai paused when he said this. A meaningful smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, and a strange color flashed in his eyes. At this time, after Lu Xingyi heard what Yehai said, he half closed his eyes. He turned his head and stared directly at Yehai, with the corners of his mouth raised. A bit of ridicule. You don't seem to have understood the situation now. For me, there is no need to cooperate with you now. After all, as long as I want, it is still very easy for me to obtain the elixir in your ancestral temple. Lu Xingyi just said it unhurriedly, and the corner of his mouth evoked a faint smile. At this time, he was extremely confident, and his confidence came from his ability to do so. At this time, Yehai glanced at Yayu, as if asking himself what to do next. At this time, Yayu suddenly smiled. What the Lu family leader said is indeed true. Although for us now, it is indeed like the fish on the chopping board, and we can be slaughtered by others. But hasn't the Lu family leader considered why those pills in our Ye family's ancestral hall can you stay in the ancestral hall for so many years? At this moment, Lu Xingyi was here. After hearing what Yayu said, he half squinted his eyes. Then he turned his head and glanced at Yayu, with a few flashes in his eyes. Very gloomy. Tell me, what's so great about your family that allows your treasures to remain in your family for so many years? I'm really curious. At this time, Yu suddenly smiled. That's because only people from our family can open this ancestral temple. For other people to open this ancestral temple, it will be as difficult as climbing to the sky. Unless they have an epic level, only by force can we break through the strange beast. At this time, after hearing what Yu said, Lu Xingyi narrowed his eyes and turned his head to glance coldly at Yu. At this time, Lu Xingyi suddenly smiled. How can an epic level alien beast be forcibly broken through? Are you kidding me? Do you think I don't know that since your family came to the city, if there is really someone who can possess an epic level alien beast, I'm afraid the other major families have already been finished. How could you end up in this situation? At this time, when Yu heard what Lu Xingyi said, a hint of joking flashed across his eyes and brows. He turned his head, staring directly at Lu Xingyi, and the corners of his mouth were even more, it evoked a faint smile. Didn't you just say that since we came to this place, no one has owned an epic level beast? But don't forget that our family does not belong here originally. At this time, after Lu Xingyi heard what Yu said, he half squinted his eyes, staring straight at Yu, and then raised his eyebrow slightly. Eyebrow. It seems to be true. Your family did not belong to our place at first. I know this very well, but does it matter? Lu Xingyi smiled as he spoke, and then turned his head and glanced at Yu. There were a few meaningful smiles on the corners of his mouth, and there was even more in his eyes. It's meant to be a joke. Before, our ancestors of the family were extremely prominent. Not to mention an epic level beast master, even a chaos level beast master was produced. However, later on, due to some reasons, the family gradually became lonely, so he did not leave Shangcheng district and came here to settle down. When the ancestor left, he was afraid that something would happen to the family in case of emergency, so he left a batch of pills. It is said that epic level eggs of alien beasts are all in the ancestral hall. There are 9 of them, but they have been just legends for many years, but no one has been able to get them. At this time, after Lu Xingyi heard what Yu said, her pupils suddenly enlarged, and the corners of her eyes and brows were filled with excitement. At this time, her eyes were staring directly at Yu. The smile on Jade's lips began to become more and more obvious. Are you telling the truth? At this time, Yu heard Lu Xingyi, and after he finished speaking, he nodded softly. You should know that I don't dare to lie to you. Lu Xingyi's eyes narrowed, but why should I cooperate with you? Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Shengchong. Chapter 418. At this time, Yu suddenly smiled. To be honest, only we can enter the ancestral temple of the family. Didn't you know it just now? At this time, Lu Xingyi also smiled. You don't understand what I mean. I can find someone else to cooperate with him. Why should I choose you? At this time, Lu Xingyi's eyes were fixed on Yu, and the smile at the corner of his mouth became more and more obvious. At this time, Yu still heard it. After Lu Xingyi said this, he suddenly had a few ominous premonitions in his heart. At this moment, he frowned slightly and stared at Lu Xingyi. This. At this time, Yu just laughed like this, because other people won't be as crazy as us. It's not that any disciple of the family can enter the ancestral temple. The only ones who can enter the ancestral temple are the elder and Lingxiu, and of course the third brother, and the rest of us. Even the second brother can't get in. At this time, Lu Xingyi laughed like this after hearing what Yu said, and then stood up immediately. If it's really according to what you said, then now I don't seem to have any other way except to cooperate with you. At this time, Yu heard Lu Xingyi say this, and nodded gently, and the smile on the corner of his mouth became more and more obvious. Based on the current situation, it is indeed like this. The two smiled at each other, and basically this matter has been finalized. Tonight, everyone in the Ye family will go to keep watch for the old man, so tonight is a perfect opportunity. If you miss tonight, I'm afraid you will never find such a good opportunity like tonight in the future. No problem, but why don't you go by yourself? Why do you have to come to me for cooperation? Because there are many dangers in it, we hope that the head of the Lu family can help. How about this reason? Lu Xingyi nodded slightly. I can accept this reason. Very good. In this case, then do as you say. I hope you are not lying to me. If I know that you are lying to me, what will happen to you at that time? I think you should also understand. Lu Xingyi said in a cold voice, and there was a gloomy meaning in the corners of his eyes and eyebrows. At this time, Ye Yu also nodded and smiled gently, with a little more excitement in the corners of his eyes and eyebrows. Very good, in that case, thank you very much. After Ye Yu finished speaking, he stood up and left. Ye Hai also stood up and followed Ye Yu, turning around and leaving. At this moment, Lu Xingyi stared at the backs of the two of them, and a strange color flashed in the corners of his eyes and eyebrows. At this time, Lin Yu's coffin had been built, and all the people of the Ye family knelt outside the mourning hall. At this time, Lin Yu wiped the body of the old man, and then carefully carried the old man into the coffin. At this time, Lin Yu's mouth corners also raised a few bitter smiles, and the corners of his eyes and eyebrows were full of helplessness. At this time, even his voice was slightly hoarse. Grandpa, I am unfilial and have prevented you from enjoying your old age. But now all the people in the Ye family are kneeling outside the mourning hall to apologize to you. May you rest in peace. After Lin Yu finished speaking, he took out 3 wooden boxes. There were 3 human heads in these 3 wooden boxes. The 3 heads had eyes wide open, and there was a sense of unwillingness in their eyes and eyebrows. At this time, Lin Yu took out these heads slowly, and his eyes and eyebrows were full of gloom. All the people didn't even dare to breathe, as if they were afraid of angering this killer. And the Ye family at this time. The 3 of them took advantage of the time when all the people in the Ye family went to attend the funeral, and sneaked into the Ye family quietly. There were still a few people guarding the hall in the Ye family. At this time, Ye Hai and Ye Yu smiled when they saw these people guarding the hall, and then walked towards them. When the guards saw them, they showed some excitement in their eyes, and then waved to them. It turned out to be the 4th master, and Mr. Ye Hai. I wonder what you two are doing in the ancestral hall so late at night. Ye Yu and Ye Hai just smiled. At this time, Ye Yu gently spread out the folding fan in his hand and fanned it, and then he spoke slowly. It's not a big deal. It's just that my ancestors came to my dream yesterday and said that I, an unfilial descendant, had made the Ye family what it is now. They said I deserved to die. I thought about it and realized that the Ye family was in this state. It was indeed my fault, so I came to take a look and apologize to my ancestors. At this time, the 2 guards of the ancestral hall heard Ye Yu, and after saying this, their eyes also flashed with some complicated colors. 4th Master, I think you should know the rules very well. We are just here to keep vigil, and we really can't let you in like this, so you see. When they said this, they stopped talking, their eyes were fixed on Ye Yu, and the corners of their mouths even raised a few bitter smiles. At this time, Ye Yu just raised his eyebrows slightly, and then turned his head and glared at the 2 of them coldly, and the corners of his mouth even raised a sneer. At this time, the 2 of them were also shocked, and then they subconsciously stepped back a few steps, and their eyes were fixed on Ye Yu. Mr. Ye, what do you want to do? At this time, Ye Yu suddenly laughed, and he laughed very presumptuously. What do I want to do? It's very simple, take your lives. After Ye Yu finished speaking, he did not say anything, and suddenly took action, and then his folding fan drew a cold light. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 419. At this time, the two people had not reacted, and then their throats were cut by Yayu. At this time, the two people fell straight back, their eyes widened, and their eyes were wide open. There was a look of complete disbelief. They never expected that Yayu would suddenly attack them. At this time, Lu Xingyi also walked out of the darkness slowly. He turned his head and glanced at Yayu, with a faint smile on his lips, and then he shook his head. Sure enough, I knew that it was right to cooperate with Mr. Ye. A person like Mr. Ye who has achieved great things is indeed ruthless. I admire you very much. After Yayu heard what Lu Xingyi said, he also smiled and waved his hands gently. There are people standing in front of you. They must be killed. This is a shameless thing, to be honest. I don't want to do this, but who said they are too disobedient? At this time, Yayu smiled like this, with a hint of amusement flashing in the corners of his eyes and brows. At this time, Lu Xingyi was a little wary of Yayu. His eyes were fixed on Yayu, and a special color flashed in the corners of his eyes and eyebrows. Yayu waved his hand gently, and then made a direct gesture of invitation. Master Lu, please. When Lu Xingyi heard what Yayu said, he nodded slightly, and then slowly walked inside. At this moment, when they stepped into the ancestral hall of the Ye family, the face of the elder who was still guarding the funeral was suddenly startled, and the expressions of the second and third sons suddenly sank. At this time, both of their faces were ashen. Someone has stepped into the ancestral hall, and they are still outsiders. No, this ancestral hall is the lifeblood of the Ye family. We must go back today and we must stop them. At this time, they looked at Lin Yu, who was kneeling in front of him again. They also had mixed feelings for a moment. Although they wanted to leave here and go to the ancestral temple to see what was going on. But Lin Yu, the god of death, was here and told them not to dare to mess around. At this time, Lin Yu seemed to have heard the conversation between them. He just turned his head and glared at them coldly, with a cold look in his eyes. At this time, Lin Yu was heard saying coldly, "If you dare to make a loud noise here again, you will be killed without mercy." Lin Yu's tone was unusually cold. After everyone heard what Lin Yu said, they remained silent. Although they wanted to rush back at this time, due to Lin Yu's power, they couldn't dare to rush back. After a while, Lin Yu slowly turned his head, and the morning hall instantly became quiet. A bitter smile appeared at the corners of Lin Yu's lips, and there was a sense of helplessness in the corners of his eyes and brows. "Grandpa, have a good journey, don't worry about us, we are all fine." Lin Yu just spoke softly and unhurriedly. At this time, there were tears in his eyes. The bitterness at the corner of his mouth was probably only clear to him. At this time, in the ancestral hall of the Ye family. When Lu Xingyi just stepped into the ancestral hall, he felt a very mysterious aura that lingered around him. At this time, Lu Xingyi's eyes and brows were filled with a look of disbelief. At this moment, he suddenly had a somewhat ominous premonition in his heart, and then he frowned slightly. How could it be like this? Why? I always feel like there is a pair of eyes staring at me. This is really weird. Where are the pills hidden? Please take me there quickly. At this time, Yayu heard Lu Xingyi. After saying this, a few meaningful smiles appeared on the corners of his mouth, and then he waved his hand casually. "Mr. Lu, don't be angry, and don't be anxious. There is indeed that elixir around here, but I don't know where the elixir is exactly, so now we have to find it ourselves." The weird feeling in Lu Xing's ambition at this moment was too obvious, so at this moment, his eyes were fixed on Yayu, and a murderous intention suddenly came from his body. It spread out like this. Lu Xingyi's eyes were fixed on Ye Yu, and there was a completely gloomy look in the corners of his eyes and eyebrows. Are you kidding me? I'm warning you, if I can't bring anything out of the Ye family ancestral hall today, then you too will definitely die today. At this time, Ye Yu heard Lu Xingyi. After saying this, he just smiled slightly, and then his mind moved, and the Tianlin giant python suddenly appeared behind him. At this time, after Lu Xingyi saw the giant python that day, a bit of panic flashed in his eyes. At this time, Lu Xing's eyes were staring straight at the sky-scale python, with a look of complete fear in the corners of his eyes and eyebrows. Celestial python, this is a lord-level alien beast. How could you have a lord-level alien beast? Ye Yu smiled at this time, and then walked slowly towards Lu Xingyi. You don't really think I'm here to seek your help, it's just because I can't be exposed now, so I need a scapegoat, and you are the best scapegoat. Do you really think I'm afraid of you? No. After hearing what Ye Yu said, Lu Xingyi felt like he was falling into an ice cave. A few strange colors flashed in his eyes, and then he raised his eyebrows slightly. No, no, don't do this. Ye Yu suddenly smiled at this time, and a few gloomy flashes in his eyes. If you cooperate with me honestly, then I can reluctantly spare your life, but if you are not honest and dare to talk nonsense with me, then I can only kill you, because after all, the dead are the quietest. Lu Xingyi heard it, and after Ye Yu said this, he quickly waved his hands and shook his head frantically. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 420. No, I won't say anything nonsense. I won't say anything nonsense. I don't want anything taken out from this time. I won't take anything. You see, this is okay. When Ye Yu heard what Lu Xingyi said, he squatted down and patted his shoulder gently. The smile at the corner of his mouth began to become more and more obvious. Wouldn't it be better if it was like this earlier? Don't worry, today is just to leave your breath in this ancestral hall. With the current situation of the Ye family, even if you enter this ancestral hall, the Ye family I definitely don't dare to say anything more, don't worry. At this time, Lu Xingyi's heart felt like it was falling into an ice cave. At this time, the corners of his eyes and brows were filled with a look of disbelief. At this time, his eyes were staring straight at Ye Yu. On the body. At this time, Lu Xingyi also had 10,000 grass and mud horses galloping past in his heart. At this time, he thought in his heart, oh, I knew this guy was extraordinary in strength and had such a character. If I had known earlier, I shouldn't have gone there in the first place, this muddy water. But there are all kinds of medicines for sale in the world, but there is nowhere to buy the regret medicine. So even though Lu Xingyi is filled with regret at this time, there is nothing he can do about it. The bitterness at the corner of Lu Xingyi's mouth, it started to become more and more obvious. At this time, Ye Yu turned his head and looked around casually, and then his brows changed as if they were twisted together. The corners of his eyes and brows were full of, there was a sense of helplessness, and a bit of a wry smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Hey, my alien egg was obviously found in this place, but now why can't I see anything in this place? It's strange, it's simply too strange. At this time, Ye Yu's brows seemed to be twisted together, and the bitterness at the corner of his mouth became more and more obvious. After waiting for a while, at this moment, on top of the tablet in an ancestral temple, traces of light blue smoke actually appeared. At this moment, the light blue smoke actually condensed into a human shape. At this time, Ye Yu, Ye Hai, and Lu Xingyi, after seeing this scene, the three of them had a look of complete disbelief in the corners of their eyes and eyebrows. The man's eyes were fixed on them, and a murderous intention spread from that man's body. You are the heirs of the Ye family, but now you actually caught outsiders and came to my Ye family to cause trouble. It really pisses me off. It really pisses me off. At this time, When Yehai and Lu Xingyi heard the voice, their faces were slightly startled, and a strange color flashed across the corners of their eyes and eyebrows. At this time, Yu actually took a few steps forward, and then smiled like this. The ancestors calmed down, the ancestors calmed down. Now the Ye family has reached a critical stage of survival. We just hope to get something from the ancestral hall, so that we can solve the urgent needs of the Ye family. At this time, after hearing what Yu said, the figure also had a sneer at the corner of his mouth. There was a gloomy killing intent in the corners of his eyes and brows, and a bit of coldness flashed in his eyes. A surge of anger surged into the sky. Boy, don't talk to me so much. What's going on in the Ye family now? Do you really think I don't know? You little guy is so dishonest. The figure stared straight at Yu, and at this time, Yu's face was slightly condensed, and then he smiled like this. I don't know why you said that, I'm a little unclear. After hearing what Yu said, the old man's eyes flashed with a bit of coldness, and a gloomy killing intent suddenly emerged from his body. Boy, I see you really don't shed tears until you see the coffin, and you don't look back until you hit the south wall. What kind of things did you steal from this ancestral hall before? Do you really think I can't see it? But now it's because of you the greed is here again, damn it, damn it. At this time, after Yu heard the remnant soul of his ancestor say this, a somewhat meaningful smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, and a hint of joking flashed in his eyes. Originally I didn't want to break up with you, but now it seems I have no choice. Since you have to make things so tense, now I can only send you to the west. Yu just said it in a cold and unhurried voice, and the smile at the corner of his mouth became more and more obvious. At this time, the corners of his eyes and eyebrows were filled with a kind of madness. Color. At this time, after hearing what Yu said, the remnant soul of the ancestor began to cough violently in his chest. His eyes were fixed on Yu's body, and he stretched out his hand, pointing at Yu like this. Asshole, you bastard, I must enforce the family law for all the ancestors of the Ye family today. And at this moment, Yu took out a talisman directly, and then immediately formed a seal with both hands. In just a brief moment, the talisman gradually spread over Yu's body. It began to erupt with a burst of dazzling light. When the old man saw this scene, there was a flash of surprise in his eyes. The old man was slightly shocked. At this moment, he was completely wrapped by the golden light, and then he saw that he started to burn directly from his feet. The old man screamed again and again, and the sound made people feel a little chilling. At this time, Yu shook his head, and a few cold colors flashed in the corners of his eyes and eyebrows. The sneer at the corners of his mouth became more and more obvious. You said, I didn't want to kill you originally, but there is no way. Since you want to die, if I don't kill you, you are also a little bit, it's not justified, obediently, die. After Yu finished speaking, his face was full of a kind of hideousness. At this time, the old ancestor's eyes were nailed to Yu. You beast, I curse you to have no peace day and night.